The churning, muddy waters of the Cheetah River surged around Michael Carter's chest as he battled the fierce current, a trembling cheetah cub clutching desperately to his shoulders. Just moments before, the 36-year-old wildlife photographer had been positioning his gear along the riverbank when he saw something that would alter his life forever. A tiny cheetah cub tumbling into the raging river, swept away by floodwaters that had swelled overnight due to torrential rains upstream. Michael had been documenting wildlife in Tanzania's Serengeti Plains for 9 years, but he had always adhered to the golden rule of nature photography: never interfere with the natural order. Until now. The cub, barely 3 months old, had been chasing a butterfly too close to the water's edge when the soft soil gave way beneath its delicate paws. Its frantic chirps as it was pulled downstream by the relentless current shattered Michael's professional restraint. Without a second thought, Michael abandoned his camera and dove into the perilous river. "I couldn't just stand there and let it drown," he later explained to park rangers. "Every human instinct I had overpowered my training." The rescue nearly claimed Michael's life. The Cheetah River in flood season is deadly, littered with hidden obstacles and erratic currents that have claimed countless animals and several humans over the years. As Michael struggled to reach the flailing cub, a jagged branch slammed into his right arm, nearly knocking him out. Only his resolve to save the young cheetah kept him focused. When he finally reached the exhausted cub, it instinctively wrapped its tiny paws around his neck, clinging with surprising strength. Michael could feel the cub's rapid heartbeat against his chest as he began the treacherous journey back to shore, fighting a current that seemed intent on dragging them toward the hippo-filled pools downstream. Unbeknownst to Michael, he was being watched. Hidden among the fever trees on the riverbank for adult cheetahs, 3 females and a dominant male had been tracking the cub's distress cries. The coalition had been searching for the youngster, following its scent to the river just in time to witness Michael's rescue effort. As Michael reached the shallows, gasping and drained, he looked up to face a chilling sight. The entire coalition stood in a semicircle around the riverbank, their golden eyes locked on him and the cub he carried. Michael's mind raced, but his options were non-existent. Trapped in waist-deep water, holding a cheetah cub, with 4 fully grown cheetahs blocking his path to safety, any wrong move could trigger a fatal attack. Cheetahs, though less aggressive than other big cats, are fiercely protective of their young, and Michael braced for the worst. But something extraordinary was about to unfold, something that would challenge everything known about cheetah behavior. The lead female, clearly the coalition's matriarch, stepped closer to the water. Michael froze, expecting an attack. Yet in her gaze, he saw something astonishing, not hostility, but a glimmer of recognition, and what seemed like gratitude. The cub in Michael's arms let out a soft chirp, calling to its family. The sound broke the tense silence. What happened next was captured on Michael's waterproof action camera, which had been recording the entire ordeal. The matriarch waded into the shallow water, her sleek paws sending ripples across the surface. She stopped just 2 feet from Michael, her eyes fixed on the cub, every muscle in his body tensed, anticipating an attack that never came. Instead, the matriarch did something unimaginable. She lowered her head and gently nuzzled the cub, then looked up at Michael with an expression that seemed to convey understanding. One by one, the other cheetahs approached, their movements calm and deliberate. They surrounded Michael, not in a threatening manner, but as if acknowledging his role in saving their kin. The male, with a lean, powerful frame, stood watchfully at a distance, his presence protective but not aggressive. In a moment that felt like an eternity, the matriarch took the cub gently from Michael's arms, her teeth careful and precise. The cub nestled against her, safe at last. Then, in an act that defied all expectations, the coalition turned and melted back into the fever trees, leaving Michael unharmed on the riverbank, his heart pounding with awe. The footage from Michael's camera would later spark heated debates among wildlife experts, challenging long-held beliefs about cheetah cognition and social behavior. For Michael, it was a moment of profound connection, a reminder that even in the wild, acts of compassion can bridge the gap between species. The muddy, churning waters of the Cheetah River roared around James Harper's waist as he struggled against the current, a shivering cheetah cub clinging tightly to his shoulders. Moments earlier, the 38-year-old wildlife photographer had been setting up his equipment on the riverbank when he witnessed a heart-stopping scene. A tiny cheetah cub, no more than 3 months old, tumbling into the flood-swollen river, carried off by waters that had surged overnight from heavy rains in the highlands. James had spent a decade documenting wildlife in Zambia's Kafur Plains, always adhering to the strict code of nature photography. Never interfere with the wild. But the cub's desperate chirps as it was swept downstream shattered his resolve. Without hesitation, he dropped his gear and plunged into the treacherous river. "I couldn't just stand by," he later told park officials. "It was instinct, humanity over training." The rescue was nearly his undoing. The Lwizi River in flood season is a death trap riddled with submerged debris and currents that have claimed countless lives. As James fought to reach the cub, a hidden branch slammed into his leg, nearly dragging him under. Only sheer determination kept him afloat. When he finally grasped the cub, its tiny claws dug into his neck, its rapid heartbeat pulsing against his chest. Battling the current, James began the perilous journey back to shore, the cub's weight a fragile anchor as they neared the hippo-laden pools downstream. Unseen by James, for adult cheetahs, 3 females and a powerful male, watched from the riverbank, hidden among the mopane trees. The coalition had been tracking the cub's frantic cries, following its scent to the water's edge just as James pulled it from the torrent. As James staggered into the shallows, exhausted and breathless, he froze. The coalition stood in a semicircle, their piercing yellow eyes fixed on him and the cub. Surrounded, with no escape, James braced for an attack. Cheetahs are fiercely protective, and he was a stranger holding their young. Yet what happened next defied everything he knew about wild predators. The lead female, the coalition's matriarch, stepped toward the water. James held his breath, expecting aggression. Instead, her gaze held something extraordinary: recognition, and what seemed like gratitude. The cub in his arms chirped softly, calling to its family. The sound broke the tension, and what followed was captured on James's waterproof action camera, still recording from the ordeal. The matriarch waded into the shallows, her sleek paws rippling the water. She stopped inches from James, her eyes locked on the cub. Then, in a gesture that stunned him, she lowered her head in what could only be described as a bow. The other cheetahs remained still, as if witnessing a sacred moment. When she raised her head, her gaze met James's, not the predatory stare of a hunter, but a steady acknowledgement, as if between equals. "It's okay, little one," James whispered to the cub, his voice barely audible over the river's roar. "Your family's here." As if responding, the matriarch stepped closer, her movements deliberate, non-threatening. Then, in an act that would spark global debate among zoologists, she extended her head toward James, her warm breath grazing his face. For a moment, she studied him, her intelligent eyes seeming to weigh his intentions. Then, astonishingly, she began to groom him, her rough tongue brushing his forehead, the same nurturing behavior she'd show her own kin. It was a clear message. James was no threat. He was the human who had saved one of their own. The grooming lasted only seconds, but its meaning was unmistakable. The other females approached, their postures relaxed, while the male, who had kept a wary distance, settled onto the bank, signaling peace. James, still holding the cub, moved slowly toward the shore. The coalition parted, forming a path more like an honor guard than predators encircling prey. Kneeling on the muddy bank, James gently set the cub down. The reunion was instant. The matriarch nuzzled her offspring, purring with relief as she checked for injuries. The other females joined, each sniffing the cub, while the male approached last, his massive head gently touching the youngster. James, dripping and kneeling, watched this intimate moment, surrounded by 4 of Africa's swiftest predators. Instead of fear, he felt privileged to witness the coalition's emotional bonds. Dr. Elena Mwamba, a wildlife behaviorist who later analyzed the footage, called it a paradigm shift. "Grooming is reserved for family," she said. "For a cheetah to extend this to a human suggests cognitive recognition and gratitude beyond what we've ever documented." As James began to back away, the matriarch looked up and emitted a soft, rumbling call, not a growl, but a sound almost conversational. The coalition watched him retreat, their eyes calm, as if bidding farewell to an ally. James left the riverbank forever changed, his footage a testament to a moment of trust that bridged the divide between human and wild. The turbulent waters of the Nkosi River swirled around Ethan Brooks' waist as he fought the relentless current, a trembling cheetah cub clinging to his shoulders. Just minutes before, the 35-year-old wildlife photographer had been setting up his gear on the riverbank in Botswana's Okavango Plains when he saw a cheetah cub, barely 3 months old, swept into the floodwaters after the bank crumbled beneath its paws. Its desperate chirps pierced Ethan's professional restraint, compelling him to dive into the dangerous river to save it. Ethan had spent 7 years documenting wildlife in the Okavango, always respecting the rule, never interfere. But this cub's plight changed everything. "I couldn't watch it drown," he later told rangers. The rescue was perilous. A submerged log struck his side, nearly knocking him out, but he reached the cub, its tiny claws gripping him as they battled back to shore. Unseen for adult cheetahs, 3 females and a dominant male, watched from the tamarind trees, drawn by the cub's cries. As Ethan staggered into the shallows, he faced the coalition's intense gaze. Expecting an attack, he was stunned when the matriarch approached with a calm, almost grateful expression, bowing her head in a gesture that seemed ceremonial. The cub chirped, and the matriarch waded closer, grooming Ethan's forehead with her rough tongue, a nurturing act reserved for family. The others relaxed, the male settling peacefully on the bank. Ethan moved toward shore, the coalition forming 2 parallel lines, creating a path to his equipment under the tamarind trees. "Impossible," Ethan whispered, his action camera capturing every moment. "They're escorting me." The matriarch flanked his right, the male his left, with the females maintaining perfect spacing in a slow, ceremonial walk. The cub, now strong enough to trot, brushed against Ethan's leg, its curiosity replacing fear. At his gear, the matriarch paused, pressing her forehead to his in a cheetah's trusted greeting. "Thank you," Ethan murmured, overwhelmed. One by one, the cheetahs approached, gently nudging or brushing against him, even the male, who bumped Ethan's shoulder. The cub, last to say goodbye, sat before him, chirping softly as Ethan stroked his head. As the coalition melted into the trees for their midday rest, Ethan stood, soaked and awestruck, his camera having recorded a moment that would captivate the world. Dr. Miriam Kweka, a wildlife behaviorist, called the footage unprecedented. This grooming and escort behavior suggests cheetahs recognize cross-species compassion in ways we've never understood, she said. The video, authenticated and studied globally, was hailed by Dr. Jane Goodall as a profound example of interspecies gratitude. The cub grew to adulthood within its coalition. Ethan, continuing his work in the Okavango, often encountered them. The matriarch always greeted him with a soft chuff, and the grown cub would rest near his vehicle, unafraid. Local guides nicknamed him Cheetah's kin, and tourism operators launched Brooks Okavango tours, though none matched his experience. Dr. Kweka founded the Brooks Okavango Research Trust to study cheetah cognition, writing, "Ethan's encounter shows that compassion transcends species, revealing a shared language of gratitude and honor." For Ethan, that day in the Nkosi River was a testament to the universal power of empathy, proving that even in the wild, kindness speaks louder than instinct.